On a freezing morning in January 1910, a 14-year-old boy stood on the deck of a steamship as it drifted slowly into the gray mist of New York City harbor. He wasn't supposed to be alive. 3 weeks earlier, he had been buried under a collapsed coal tunnel somewhere beneath the industrial outskirts of Liverpool. The newspapers printed his name under the column titled "Presumed Dead." A priest had already whispered prayers for his soul. And yet, here he was. His name was Daniel Whitaker, and the first thing he saw through the fog that morning was the shadow of the Statue of Liberty rising out of the Atlantic like something ancient and watchful. People around him cried. Some fell to their knees. Others laughed like they had just escaped hell. A woman behind him kept repeating, "We made it! We made it! We made it!" Daniel didn't say a word, because Daniel knew something that none of them did. He hadn't come to America for freedom. He had come because someone in the United States had tried to kill him and failed. The ship finally docked at Ellis Island just after sunrise. Immigration officers shouted instructions in thick accents. Boots echoed across wet wooden floors. Luggage slammed against iron railings. Children clung to their mothers. Men rehearsed English phrases under their breath as if their future depended on pronunciation alone. Daniel carried nothing but a small leather satchel. Inside it were 3 things: a rusted brass compass that didn't point north, a blood-stained railway ticket dated December 17, 1909, and a folded piece of paper containing 6 numbers written in blue ink. 4, 1, 9, 7, 2, 3. He didn't know what they meant, but 2 men in London had been willing to murder him for it. By noon, Daniel had passed through inspection. No fever, no limp, no visible insanity. "Name?" asked the officer. "Daniel Whitaker." "Age?" 14. "Destination?" Daniel hesitated. He reached into his coat and unfolded another letter, this one carefully sealed. "Boston," he replied quietly, "to my uncle." The officer stamped his documents. Just like that, Daniel Whitaker officially entered America. He had no idea that within 5 years, he would be arrested by federal agents, accused of espionage against the U.S. government, secretly recruited into an intelligence network that did not officially exist, and sent back across the Atlantic to investigate a disaster that would kill over 1,500 people. That night, Daniel slept in a crowded boarding house on the Lower East Side. Through the cracked window, he could see the city breathing. Factories hissed steam into the night air. Horse-drawn wagons rattled over cobblestone streets. Somewhere in the distance, a phonograph played ragtime through a thin apartment wall. America didn't feel like freedom. It felt like something waiting. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Daniel woke up to the sound of someone knocking on his door. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, but deliberate. He opened his eyes. Another knock. Then a voice from the hallway. "Daniel Whitaker?" His heart stopped, because nobody in America was supposed to know his name yet. The third knock was softer than the first 2, but this time it came with his name again. "Daniel Whitaker." The boarding house was silent. No footsteps in the hallway, no doors opening, no whisper of movement from the other rooms. Daniel sat up slowly on the narrow iron bed. The mattress springs creaked beneath him like a warning. Nobody in New York City was supposed to know his name. Not yet. Not until Boston. Not until... Another knock. 3 times again. Whoever it was knew the pattern. Daniel slid off the bed without making a sound. The wooden floor was ice cold against his bare feet. He reached for the leather satchel beneath the pillow, fingers trembling as he checked that it was still there. Compass, ticket, numbers, still inside, still his, still worth killing for. "Daniel," the voice said again, this time almost kindly, "you don't want to make this difficult." The accent wasn't American, it was British. Daniel's throat tightened. That meant one thing: London hadn't let him go. Outside, somewhere down the block, a police whistle shrieked in the night air. A carriage rattled over frozen stone. The city moved on, unaware that history had just found room 17. Daniel stepped toward the door. Each step felt like betrayal. When he reached the handle, he paused, because suddenly he remembered something the coal tunnel foreman had said to him just before the collapse. "If anyone ever comes asking about numbers, run." The handle turned in his hand. He opened the door and found a man in a dark wool overcoat standing beneath the flickering hallway lamp. Mid-30s, clean-shaven, hat tilted low enough to hide his eyes, but not low enough to hide the scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. "I was hoping you'd answer," the man said calmly. Daniel didn't reply. Instead, he looked down at the man's gloves, railway suit, same as London. "I represent an organization," the man continued, stepping forward slightly, "one that has taken a very serious interest in your survival." Daniel's grip tightened on the door. "I don't have anything," he whispered. The man smiled faintly. "That's where you're mistaken." He reached into his coat. Daniel flinched, but the man didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a photograph, old, creased, faded at the corners. He handed it to Daniel without a word. Daniel took it, looked down, and felt the floor disappear beneath him. The photograph showed a ship, a massive ocean liner, 4 smokestacks rising into the sky. Crowds gathered along the docks, crewmen loading cargo, a name painted across the hull: Titanic. Daniel looked up slowly. "I don't understand," he said. The man's smile vanished. "You will." There was a pause. Then the man spoke again, quieter this time. "That ship is going to sink." Daniel blinked. "What?" "And when it does," the man continued, "over 1,500 people are going to die in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean." Silence. The hallway lamp buzzed overhead. Daniel stared at the photograph again. The ship looked impossible, unsinkable. "That's not the worst part," the man said. Daniel's voice barely came out. "What is?" The man leaned closer, close enough that Daniel could smell tobacco on his breath, close enough that Daniel could hear the words before they were finished. "The worst part is that your numbers are already on board." Daniel didn't speak. He couldn't. The hallway of the boarding house in New York City suddenly felt too narrow, too close, as if the walls themselves were listening. "The numbers," the man said calmly. 4, 1, 9, 7, 2, 3. Daniel's fingers instinctively tightened around the satchel behind his back. "I don't know what they mean." The man tilted his head slightly. "That's precisely why you're still alive." He stepped into the room without asking permission and closed the door behind him. No raised voice, no threats, just certainty. "The ship in that photograph," he continued, "is being completed in Belfast by Harland and Wolff. It belongs to the White Star Line." Daniel had never heard those names before, but he recognized the tone. This wasn't rumor. This was information, high-level information. "It is being called Unsinkable," the man continued, "a floating monument to modern engineering, the largest moving object ever built by human hands." He paused. "But it contains a flaw." Daniel swallowed. "What kind of flaw?" The man's eyes finally met his. the kind that doesn't happen by accident. A cold silence filled the room. Outside, a factory whistle screamed somewhere across the city. Steam hissed through the night like a warning no one understood. "You're saying someone plans to sink it?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the small table by the window and placed the photograph flat against the wood. Then he pulled out a folded document. Blueprint fragments, section diagrams, hull compartments, watertight doors, rows of numbers, and circled in blue ink 4197223. Daniels felt the air leave his lungs. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Is it?" the man asked quietly. He tapped the blueprint. Compartment configuration, bulkhead alignment, rivet batches, steel supply codes, manufacturing sequences, insurance filings. Tap 4, tap 1, tap 9. Each number matched a section of the ship's construction layout. Each number corresponded to a hidden logistical decision made months apart. Different departments, different signatures, different authorizations. Yet together, they formed a single chain. A chain that would determine which sections flooded first, which doors failed, which lifeboats were never loaded. Daniel's voice shook. "Why are you telling me this?" The man stepped back into the shadow near the door. "Because the cool tunnel in Liverpool where you died wasn't random." Daniel's heart pounded. "You were moving supply crates for a subcontractor, steel rivets, serial batch numbers." Daniel remembered. The crates marked with blue stencils. He had memorized numbers absent-mindedly while waiting for shifts to end. It had been stamped repeatedly on a shipment manifest, over and over, until he wrote it down without even realizing why. "And then," the man said softly, "you overheard something." Daniel's mind flashed back to the tunnel. Two men arguing in low voices. One saying, "Once the ship sails, there's no reversing it." The other replying, "It must look like an accident." Then the explosion, the collapse, darkness. Daniel looked up. "You're saying I wasn't supposed to survive?" "No," the man said evenly. "You weren't." Silence pressed against the walls. "And now?" Daniel asked. The man adjusted his gloves. "Now you're in America." He stepped closer, and America is about to finance that ship. Daniel froze. "What?" "The investors," the man said carefully, "are not only British." He let the implication hang. Banks in New York City, industrial magnates, railroad empires, men who shaped the economy of the United States. "This isn't just about a ship," he continued. "It's about insurance restructuring, maritime law, transatlantic trade dominance." He leaned in slightly. "And political leverage." Daniel stared at the blueprint again. Thousands of lives reduced to calculations. "So why not stop it?" he demanded. The man's expression hardened. "Because the people involved don't lose either way." A pause. Then, "We need proof." Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears. "Proof of what?" "That the flaw is intentional." The man reached into his coat again. This time he pulled out a ticket. Not for steerage, not for second class, first class, White Star Line, maiden voyage, April 1912, Southampton to New York, RMS Titanic. The name gleamed in elegant print. Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm 14. "You'll be 16 when it sails." "That doesn't change anything." "It changes everything." The man walked toward the door. Before opening it, he turned back once more. "You weren't allowed to die in Liverpool," he said quietly, "because someone decided you might be useful." He opened the door, paused. "And if we're wrong?" Daniel's voice cracked. "And if you're right," the man countered softly. The door closed, footsteps faded down the hallway, and Daniel Whitaker stood alone in room 17, holding a ticket for a ship that had not yet sailed, a ship the world would soon call Unsinkable, and 6 numbers that might decide who survived it. Far across the Atlantic, in the shipyards of Belfast, sparks flew into the night sky as men welded steel into destiny. None of them knew that somewhere in New York, a boy who wasn't supposed to be alive was about to change the course of history.